Oh, what's up, heathens? How y'all doing? It's early today. I got my coffee. What kind of dumb shit are we listening to?
And so we got a live response tonight on Godless Engineers. So we're going to do, like a video and see. We'll just go from there. And
Fucking great. Praise I am that I am? Really? He reviewed my video? There's no way this is gonna be coherent. If you're interested in this incoherent shit, then please stay tuned. So, as of right now, Converse Contender is supposed to be on my channel this Thursday night. So, I hope that you guys will tune in then so I can directly confront Converse Contender some of the things that he says here and some of the issues he has with my personal views on Christianity and religion in general. I do want to give Converse Contender a little bit of credit here because several times in this particular review of my video, Converse Contender actually wanted to hear what I was going to say or what argument I was going to make or rather not make. So I just really want to say that I appreciate that. I mean, I still think he's wrong every time he stops me and every criticism that he has about my video, but hey, at least you let me finish my statement.
Doing that, I'll just say I'm not that familiar with Godless Engineer. I've watched some of his videos. Honestly, he's a mythicist, and I watched the debate. It's been months ago. I'd say he got schooled on mythicism.
Oh man, right out the gate with a genetic fallacy. He's poisoned the well against my video because he looks down on mythicism? So automatically my video is just going to be wrong and stupid. I mean, they don't even have to think about it whatsoever or even listen to the video or even take into consideration anything that I say. And I mean, praise I am that I am definitely demonstrates that. Just to be clear, there are some crank mythicist arguments out there. There is a reasonable mythicist position out there, and I feel like I hold to that particular position. That's going to be subjective, of course, but I know that I base my conclusions in actual evidence rather than apologetics. Also, I was not schooled on mythicism by McGlatchy. I mean, he considers Luke Acts to be actually written by Luke, and the Gospels are written by the authors indicated in the titles, which is in fact not the consensus of historians. Not that that makes it true, I'm just saying for future reference in this video, that's going to be very important. But the Gospels were attributed these authors about in the 2nd century, most notably from Papias. But there's no good reason to accept that the titles of each individual gospel represents the authorship of that gospel. The Gospels never name any authors or any sources, other than scripture. There is substantial evidence that Luke Acts actually utilized Josephus as well as other ancient historians in order to fill his gospel and Acts with historical color. McGlatchy doesn't have a critical historical position. He has an apologetic one. What are we talking about today?
Ryan, how would you make a case for the resurrection for somebody who does not believe the Bible is authoritative?
Say what now?
so all this is, well, from the beginning, you can already see it's just like an argument from incredulity.
Yeah.
Like, it's like he can't believe it because it's just, it doesn't comport with his reality or something.
This is literally the hook of the video. I have not made an argument yet, and there's not supposed to be an argument in the hook. So I don't know why you're claiming that I'm being personally incredulous about the resurrection when I haven't made any kind of statement that would indicate that. I mean, do you know how good YouTube videos are structured? Obviously you don't. Just to give you a little bit of YouTube 101, the hook of a video is supposed to tease the viewer on what's to come in the video, not any kind of actual meat of the video, just teasing the meat. Now, of course, it makes no sense to say that I'm being personally incredulous when I'm not making an argument, but as you will find out, they do this throughout the entire review. They simply argue against arguments that I don't make.
It's like if I were to say, a long time ago, millions of years ago, there was nothing but a sea of foam or a foaming energy. And it exploded from that foam of energy into all material world and create and introduce time and space and matter. And then from non-life, life became and evolved from non-living matter, and it evolved into a very complex organism from plant life to animal life to human life. It evolved to the point where it could reflect on the things that it's experiencing and even reflect on the conversation that we're even experiencing, the fact that it all happened. And then somebody could just go, what? You know what I'm saying? Like,
it's the same type. Yeah, it's the same type. We can have our own arguments from incredulity and say that makes no. That's like wacko to believe in such a thing like that.
What the fuck are you talking about? So let me get this straight. You're trying to compare the hook that's supposed to tease the audience about the video that I'm going to be reviewing, and you're comparing it to the Big Bang Theory? You see, here's the thing about your description, though, is that I can't tell if you're being purposefully ridiculous or if you literally think that is what the Big Bang Theory is. What would a foam of energy even fucking look like? I mean, do you think nothing exploded and then the Earth popped out? Everyone's initial reaction to what you just said should be, what the fuck are you talking about? Okay, let's do this shit. If you're interested in how Jesus didn't actually rise from the dead, then please stay tuned.
Right, and of course he doesn't, he can't back that claim up. He doesn't want to back that claim up. So he's just doing it for bravado and for, I think, viewers. It's all for get popular. It's like a popularity contest or something with these guys.
I have a whole playlist on my YouTube channel called Resurrection Refuted, where I discuss all of the arguments that Christians make to prove the resurrection was real, and I debunk them. I do believe that my entire body of work on the resurrection would show that I can and I do back up my claim that the resurrection most likely never happened. I'm also not doing this to be popular. That's literally not my goal on YouTube. If that were my goal, I would definitely be a lot fucking nicer about it. I would soften it up so it's digestible to a much wider audience. But what do you find me doing? It's pretty powerful on the Christian, gospel and everything like that to actually have people begging to suck your dick. That's not gonna get me popular. I'm just adding my voice to the discussion, and sometimes people listen more than others. But to say that I do this for popularity's sake is just ridiculous.
I just want to make this quick point, though, that doubt isn't really... See, I think atheists, one of their principles, if you want to say it, is doubt everything or something. But there's nothing really there that is virtuous about doubt. I'm going to make that clear. There's no philosophy that has ever justified that doubt works.
This is so stereotypically Christian. First of all, I'm not really interested in discussing whether or not doubt is a virtue or not. But I do believe that you should doubt things that don't have good supporting evidence. You know, like the resurrection of a Jew in the 1st century. I feel like praise is basically saying that you should just believe everything that you're told in life. You shouldn't doubt anything, and that nothing has ever been justified by doubt. Yet he doubts things like evolution, science, other religions. I mean, obviously doubt's okay for him to use in the situations where he doubts things, but obviously if he agrees with something, you're just not supposed to doubt it whatsoever. The Gospels, anything else like that can't be used as evidence for this. So any of the information...
Well, I don't see how it can't, because not every single literary text back then had other external sources available anyway. Beyond, to say, we do actually have Romans, of course, we have Roman accounts and we have the Talmud, but that line of argumentation doesn't work because back then they didn't have this available to have these other external accounts.
Well, I'm wondering, why can we not have the Gospels? I didn't catch an argument for that. I just heard the claim we can't have them. Where's the argument?
Great point. Exactly.
I'm just wondering, honestly, I'm just like, maybe he's got a good reason. I haven't heard it yet. He just said, I'll give you Paul, but you can't use the Gospels. Now let's listen and see if we can find an argument for that.
That's contained within the Gospels shouldn't be used as a fact or any kind of evidence of a resurrection.
That's a good question. I think
All
a lot
right,
of Christians.
stop right there. He just states it. He just makes the assertion.
Right.
He didn't give any like. I don't even require evidence. I just want an argument. Like, but you can't use the Gospels. The Gospels are not. Give me something like, because we don't know if Luke was actually written by Luke, or give me something I can work with. Like, you can't just outright just say I'm not allowing it. Like,
Yeah, I just make
You're not the
blanket
referee.
statements. It's just not real because it's just not real. That's how stupid it sounds like. It's almost like he's trying to convince himself.
Is that really what? Is there really nothing right after that?
Yeah, there's nothing.
It sounded like he went. It sounded like he went right back into the video.
Yeah.
Wow. Y'all have goldfish memory or some shit, right? I mean, do you not remember this part that you just listened to?
Ryan, how would you make a case for the resurrection for somebody who does not believe the Bible is authoritative?
That is the beginning of the video that I'm responding to. They restricted themselves from using the Bible. I am actually opening up the evidence a little bit to include Paul. And I was just reaffirming that the gospel shouldn't be used as evidence in this situation. You see, I don't have to state my reason for not considering the gospels to be reliable because I'm not the one that's setting the context for this particular video. This only shows that you're chomping at the bit to make me look like an idiot. Yet you find yourselves looking like the fools. You know, honestly, I figured when I was making this video, I would actually get brownie points from Christians because I'm not just going the general atheist route of, oh, the Bible can't be used to confirm the Bible. I'm actually critically considering each book in the Bible as whether or not it can be historical evidence. I mean, refusing the entire New Testament would exclude any evidence that you guys have. It would also be very ignorant to discount the writings of Paul, considering he was the earliest writer about Jesus. So Paul would be the closest thing to a contemporary eyewitness that we would have. But to answer your request, I don't consider the Gospels to be reliable because 1, they're not independent, and 2, they weren't written by eyewitnesses or secondary eyewitnesses. They cite no sources except for Scripture. They're also written much later than we would like, but that doesn't necessarily exclude them from being evidence. But the fact that they don't cite any kind of earthly historical sources, they just cite Scripture, it makes them suspect. We know that Paul's theology was employed by Mark, and that Mark also used another Jesus that died right before Mark was writing, Jesus ben Ananias, in order to construct his gospel. And the other gospels just redact and expand upon Mark. There is no Q document because Q is hypothetical, and there's nothing to distinguish the Q source from Mark. And that's why I don't consider the Gospels to be reliable accounts of history.
Christians would be surprised to know that there's a lot of evidence for the resurrection of Jesus.
No, there's actually not. Legit, the best evidence of a resurrection that I've heard comes from Frank Turek, who explains how the Pauline Creed, the creed in, 1 Corinthians 15, 3 through 8 or something like that, that particular creed, I think, is the best evidence that you could get for like a resurrection or something like that. Like actually happening, I guess, because...
So I'm going to jump in real quick, and I'll let you jump in as well. But that's horse manure. And actually, I don't know if you heard of Gary Habermas's Minimal Facts. I'll just name him really quick. Now, this is a lesson for godless or brainless engineer, because after IP, I think he merits that. Like, he goes to Wikipedia and all these other stupid things. But here's 6 minimal facts that all, not just one, all except for Richard Carrier, who's like a fringe crazy lunatic that no one even really gives credence to. But here's the 6 minimal facts that Gary Habermas himself has put his own credibility on the line, so he can't lie about this.
I've extensively responded to Gary Habermas and his minimal facts. His minimal facts either aren't facts or don't support the conclusion that Jesus rose from the dead. So I'm not going to put my audience through you regurgitating Gary Habermas's ideas like they're something novel. Also, I rarely use Wikipedia to source my information. I use authors like Randall Helms, John Dominic Crossan, Richard Carrier, Richard Purvo, Raphael Lataster, and many other historians that are actually experts in the field of history. I find it utterly hilarious that two seemingly uneducated amateur YouTube apologists call Richard Carrier a fringe crazy lunatic and that nobody gives him serious credence. I mean, he has a PhD from Columbia University in ancient history, specifically Greece and Rome. The Journal of Early Christian Studies didn't consider Carrier to be a fringe lunatic or that nobody gave him any kind of credence when they published his paper on the references to Jesus in Josephus's work. That paper was also peer-reviewed. Richard also has 2 peer-reviewed books specifically on the history of Jesus. He's also collaborated with many other historians in this particular subject area. Also, the whole Gary wouldn't lie and put his credibility on the line thing, I mean, what kind of credibility do you think Gary Habermas has? It's definitely not historical credibility. I mean, he's good at apologetics and convincing Christians to stay Christian. And he teaches at Liberty University, which is kind of barely a university. Some would say that it's not a university at all. But that's because of how low its standards are. Gary is refuted by other Christian historians like Robert Van Voorst because the history that Gary does is very flawed. The idea that we should implicitly trust Gary Habermas on this issue because he wouldn't lie is just foobarred reasoning.
I don't know. I'm just dumbfounded that he would say, I don't know. I guess I'm still stuck on the first point he made, that we can have Paul, but we can't use the Gospels. And it's just crazy that he did not give an argument for that. He just said it. It just goes, you can have Paul, but you can't use the Gospels. All right, now let's get on to the video.
Ryan, how would you make a case for the resurrection for somebody who does not believe the Bible is authoritative?
So we have Paul, and the best evidence we have is the First Corinthians passage. Well, I guess what he's referring to is that passage goes back to an earlier source, like the Q document, what scholars call the Q source. And in that sense, the Q source isn't just used by Paul. So I would say he needs to be consistent with his standard.
So first of all, the Q source is not a real source. It's hypothetical, with no way of distinguishing it from Mark. Mark Goodacre, a Christian historian, makes a very good case for doubting the existence of Q. To talk like Q is an actual document is really disingenuous. Next, I'm remaining consistent, you dipshits, because I'm following the rules of the video that I'm reviewing, with the one concession that I made. You guys are complaining about the Christians framing the video to exclude the Bible, and then you're blaming me for excluding the Bible. But I would contend that y'all are the ones that are being inconsistent here, because earlier you harped on the Gary Habermas 6 minimal facts thing, and Gary Habermas doesn't actually attribute the Pauline Creed to the Q document. He actually attributes them to Peter and James from Galatians 1. Also, the Q source would not contain the Pauline Creed. All the Q source does, supposedly, is contain sayings of Jesus. The Pauline Creed would not be a saying of Jesus. I mean, maybe you guys need to remain consistent in the bullshit apologetics you spit out.
But here's another thing, too. Didn't the Romans, there were several, our church fathers, Justin Martyr, and all these other ones, they affirmed the resurrection of Jesus, but they affirmed it through the contemporary sources that were there. I mean, that's how they would go back and they would affirm those contemporary sources through the 1st or 2nd century accounts we have.
Justin Martyr did not historically verify shit. Justin had a very lackadaisical view of his faith. He just simply read what the gospel message was and believed it. There was no historical research done by any church father. Furthermore, there's no contemporaneous accounts of the resurrection. All you have are accounts after it supposedly happened. That's not contemporaneous eyewitness accounts. Of course, you guys think that the Gospels are reliable historical documents.
He's like, I'll give you Paul, but you can't use anybody else. I mean, I think that's probably because he's a mythicist. I could be wrong, but
yeah, he's a mythicist.
I think that's probably why. You're right. I think that's probably why he states that, though, and I just don't understand the argument. Maybe we can go on and we'll understand more when he makes more points.
I like how instead of trying to figure out why I reject the Gospels as legitimate history, you just blame it on the mythicism. In fact, I rejected the historical reliability of the Gospels before I ever became a mythicist. So, joke's on you, dipshits! Because in that creed, Paul, he talks about Christ dying and being buried and then rising again. But even then, that's just Paul regurgitating what Paul already believes, what the faith tells him. And it's very important with Paul because you see, Paul vehemently denies that he gets his information from anybody here on earth. The only way that he gets his information is through a vision by Jesus Christ or through the scriptures. So all of his information comes.
I don't think that's
not true.
Yeah, that's not true. He had Gamaliel.
But didn't he also say, I brought to you what I first received?
Yeah, let me look that up real quick.
And then, again, I just mentioned the Q source. Airmen and all the people that this godless engineer dude look up to, they all say, well, I don't know if he looks up to Airmen because Airmen utterly refuted mythicists in his debate with Robert Price. If you haven't seen it, go watch that debate between Robert Price and Bart Ehrman on mythicism.
Paul says, for what I received, I pass on to you. That does not contradict anything that I said. He received it from a celestial Jesus. And Bart Ehrman didn't refute mythicism in one debate. That's just ridiculous to suggest. Now, I'm not saying that Price won that exchange by any account. But Ehrman didn't refute the position either. In fact, Ehrman's book, Did Jesus Exist? 1, isn't peer-reviewed, and 2, is considered of lower quality historiography than his other works that he's published. And this comes from Raphael Lataster's most recent work on the historical Jesus. In that particular book, which is meant for universities, he examines Ehrman's arguments for a historical Jesus, and he finds them to be very, very poor arguments.
Oh, I found the verse that you were bringing up, Converse, and here it is, 1 Corinthians 15:3. He says, "For what I received, I pass on to you as of first importance, that Christ died for our sins according to the Scriptures." So he received that.
Right, but that's the exact verse that he went to. That's the exact verse that he quoted.
Yeah.
He said, the first Corinthians, then he says, and Paul didn't get it from anybody. And it specifically says that. And then he says, according to the Scriptures, which was the Testament. He's saying, according to what, this, and according to the Scriptures, like he's saying, like it's verified by the Scriptures, basically.
Right.
That doesn't mean that he got it from somebody on earth. In Galatians 1:11, he says that he didn't get it from any man, only from a celestial Jesus. For I would have you know, brothers, that the gospel that was preached by me is not man's gospel. For I did not receive it from any man, nor was I taught it, but I received it through a revelation of Jesus Christ. The according to the Scriptures phrase indicates where they got their information, not that the events are corroborated by the Scriptures. I mean, can you guys take off your Christian lenses for like a second? Because you were only considered an apostle like Paul and like Peter and like other people at the time. You were only considered an apostle if you had a vision of Jesus, not if you actually met Jesus in real life or anything like that. In fact,
yeah, he was saying that Paul doesn't qualify or constitute apostle. I don't understand. How does that work? How does he determine that?
You couldn't have any information originating from earth or from people. It all had to come from the celestial realm, from Jesus himself. That was the only way you had authority to speak on Christian theology at the time.
All right, he's saying that Paul had no justification to be an apostle or an inspired man of God outside of a supposed encounter with Jesus. Now,
what in the fuck are you talking about, Praise? I literally said that Paul was an apostle. I mean, can you not fucking just listen to the video that you're watching? Or is that like too much to ask of you? You know, I'm beginning to think you're the brainless one in this stream.
It depends on what the definition of an apostle. Because if an apostle is that you had a direct encounter with Jesus, then him saying he has no way of being proven apostle except for his experience with Jesus. And then it's like, well, that's the definition of being an apostle. It's like, it's the top. I mean, I don't get his point. So like,
It's almost like that wasn't the argument I was fucking making. Also, an experience of Jesus is not the same thing as speaking to Jesus before he died.
well, you know, I get this a lot with non-believers on, like, for example, miracles. They'll say miracles can't be an explanation because they are so improbable. And I go, so miracles are improbable? That's the definition of a miracle, basically, is that it's an event that doesn't typically happen. Like, if it happened all the time, it wouldn't be called a miracle. It'd just be called a regular occurrence. And I love it when non-believers go, well, miracles can't be the explanation because they don't happen very often or they're improbable. It's like, you just define what a miracle is and then say it can't happen. Like, whatever.
Miracles aren't evidence because up to this point, all miracles have either been proven to be false or have been unable to be verified. So yes, the incredibly low probability that miracles actually happen, disregard them as evidence, but that low probability can be overcome by massive amounts of evidence that show that miracles actually happen. I like how a little bit ago you were calling Richard Carrier a fringe-crazy lunatic that has no credence whatsoever, and now you're claiming miracles as evidence. That's just fascinating to me.
What I'm about to say, I have to give credit to Gary Habermas. He's done a lot of work in this. And what he's done is he has dug around, done some research, found thousands of different scholars and sources in English, French, and German dating back to 1975. And what he found is virtually all scholars, Christian and skeptic alike, agree upon a certain number of facts.
Okay, so before he gets into the facts here, I would like to show how this is the start of the argument from authority. Now, a lot of people are confused by the argument from authority.
Now, okay, so here's my objection to this. Now, what's the difference between this and peer review? Peer review, they come up with their consensuses, and they are valid to Godless Engineer. He accepts the consensus.
Do you know what fucking peer review is? Because I don't think you do. Peer review does not develop a consensus. It means that somebody other than yourself has looked over your work and has verified that you're not claiming purple elephants rain from the sky, or some other really ridiculous claim. I do accept some scholarly consensus out there, but only because I've examined the evidence and I have agreed with the conclusions that they made. But I also don't think that you have to go that in depth into any particular subject in order to believe the consensus of any expert. I think it's perfectly fine for people to believe in the consensus, because normally a consensus is built upon massive amount of evidence that would prove the conclusion of the consensus to be true. But sadly, this is not what we find when we start to look at Christian history. But I would say that if you're going to argue for a position, then just citing the consensus is not an argument. Because a lot of people mistake it for the argument from false authority. That would be somebody that has authority in one field and gives an opinion on another field, and then somebody uses that opinion to prove their point. That would be an argument from false authority. But an argument from authority is mainly just citing the authorities that they all agree on this. It's a lot like the bandwagon fallacy. If all you're going to do is cite the fact that scholars all agree on these facts, then that doesn't mean that these facts are actually facts. You have to actually give evidence for those facts being facts.
All right.
You can't just say...
All right. So, first of all, an argument from authority is only a fallacy when that authority that you cite is not an authority. Like, if you cite an authority and say, well, the people who study this stuff, they agree with this, that's not a fallacy from authority. That's just citing the authorities.
Well, I mean, I'm looking at the argument from authority fallacy page here, and it seems to indicate that you don't know what the fuck you're talking about.
You see, he doesn't want to admit that because he's a mythicist. His view is the opposite. His view is the opposite of an appeal to an authority. It's appeal to the fallacy of authority every time, because none of his views are held by the authorities.
So, wait, the authorities don't prove something to be true, but they definitely prove something to be false? How does that make any kind of fucking sense? Also, that could be turned around on you in multiple different ways, so I really don't know if you want to get yourself in that particular pickle. And I don't hold that position because I'm a mythicist. God damn, why do you fuckers always have to say that shit? How about instead of just inventing motivations for me, you actually listen to what the fuck I'm saying to you?
You can cite an authority. It doesn't mean like you're saying that, well, that because we cite something, that doesn't mean it's because they cite it. It means that it's true. We're just saying that's what the evidence leads to. The authorities have their own evidence.
This is literally a bandwagon fallacy. But in order for you to stay consistent, you would also have to agree with the authorities on various subjects that you don't consider to be true, like, evolution, the Big Bang Theory, the historicity of the Old Testament, historicity of the New Testament. You obviously don't follow your own standard here, and it just results in you cherry picking which authorities you agree with, which I'm fine with. I'm fine with people picking which consensus they agree with and which ones they don't. I'm not the one that's sitting over here being like, oh, you disagree with the consensus, therefore you're wrong. I mean, I don't know what y'all's positions are on, like, evolution and the rest of science, climate change, the Pentateuch. I don't know what y'all's positions are on that, but I'm guessing you're not going to disappoint with your inconsistency.
Just because peer review says evolution happened, okay, then you can't say, well, that's evidence. Then how could you even formulate or come to the conclusion that there's mountains of evidence for evolution through peer review? So I think you're being, obviously, you're playing both sides of the fence there. That's being hypocritical.
I guess I was right, dipshits. And also, the consensus on conclusions in history are changing all the time with new information and new understandings of existing information. So using authorities to prove something to be true doesn't really help your position in proving that it's true. Now, I do have to disagree with John Crossan on this, mainly because the evidence doesn't really seem to support the crucifixion being one of the most solidified things that we can be certain of or something like that in history. I disagree because the only evidence that we have that this so-called Jesus was actually crucified is Paul. That's literally the only evidence that we have.
That is such a fabrication. Wow, I can't believe he just actually went on air and said that. What a clown.
Yeah, I can't believe he said that.
Yeah, I did say that because it's true. Paul is our earliest and only independent attestation to Jesus being crucified. All references to Jesus being crucified after Paul was writing were influenced by Paul, either directly or indirectly.
I mean, even in the Quran, they have to make an amendment that says it was made to look like Christ was crucified, because like if that's not something from history, why even mention it?
Right, exactly.
Oh, impeccable logic here, guys. Documents written hundreds of years after the religion was initially established definitely prove shit happened in history. Well, I mean, them being written hundreds of years later wouldn't necessarily exclude them, but the fact that they don't reference any contemporary eyewitnesses to the crucifixion or anybody that's independent of the religion in general would seem to indicate that they were just regurgitating what Christians believed after they had established their religion. Just fucking awesome, guys. I have to say, atheism defeated. Let's get this shit. Take these lights down. Fuck this background right here. Just fuck this thing. We're done. We're done with the atheism bit. They destroyed it. Whew. Checkmate, atheists.
Come on,
Right.
use your brainless engineers.
And on that note, I think that we'll wrap up. I really don't care what the rest they have to say in this fucking 2-hour stream, but if you will, please go down below, leave me a comment with what you think about Praise I Am That I Am or Converse Contender in this particular stream. I would really love to hear your thoughts on it. While you're down there, make sure you smash that like button and subscribe if you like this kind of video. Don't forget to stand up and use your voice, and I will see you heathens later.